sticking with us. Stick with us. We got 2 more hours left. You're listening to the Call Sports Radio, your home for ad-free, break-free, interruption-free New York sports talk. My name is Kyle Fisher. We got Jacob Gardner behind the dish. We're talking about Jets football. We're going to get into Giants football in a little bit. Talking NFL. If you want to join the conversation, give us a call, give us a text. 917-793-1717 is the number. Join the convo. I'm not a guy who's going to yell. I want to have fun. Sports are fun. Let's talk about it, and join the conversation, joining the fun with us. Talking Jets. So coming back before we get there, just to give a quick update, Tampa Bay and Cleveland, top of the 12th. Tampa with a man on. Walls up to the plate, 3-2 count. De Los Santos about to throw the pitch. Will they get out of it, or will Walls send it along? Walls gets one into the outfield. First and third, they're going to hold the runner at third, extending the inning. Could potentially see a run jump up on the board, finally change those zeros around a little bit. Again, okay, so getting back to the Jets, talking about this matchup with the Dolphins, this pivotal matchup, if you ask me. I think Wilson is going to have an opportunity here to show what he can do. And I know he's coming off of injury last week, and he's going to be moving into a position where he's going to be relied upon this week. And the Dolphins have been susceptible to the pass. He can really attack that secondary, really show off what Garrett Wilson can do. I know that he's been one of the leaders when it comes to a rookie perspective as far as receivers go. I actually picked him up in fantasy myself. He's been fun to watch. But I think that Wilson is going to have to exploit that secondary. The Dolphins have been able to stop the run a little bit more than usual, so Hall may see some challenges. The key is going to be, can they be creative? Can they get Hall in a position to succeed? But you can show off some of the depth that they have. I know that they're not super deep at receiver, but getting Wilson to attack the secondary is going to be key. Dolphins rank as one of the worst secondaries in the league, not really being able to slow down the pass much at all. A lot of their games have been high scoring as a result. And then on the other end, you may see, because it's Bridgewater, you may see more of an attack on the ground. So that defensive line, those linebackers are going to have to step up for the Dolphins. But I think the key is going to be, can the offensive line protect Wilson enough that he can exploit the secondary throughout the game and not just in those 2-minute drills down at the end of each half. I think that, like I said, stopping the run is going to be key. It hasn't come with sacks, but they're top 10 in preventing the run, or run yards, rather, I should say. They're getting plenty of pressure on opposing quarterbacks. So we're going to see how that goes. And the craziest part is, we can talk more about the matchup in a second, Jacob, if you want to revisit it. But this is a key pivotal matchup, and it doesn't get any easier from here. They have the Packers next week in London. Or no, I'm sorry, that's this week, London versus the Giants. They have the Packers next week. It's looking a little bit easier, but they have the Broncos the week after. Then they have Pats at home. Pats are never an easy matchup for the Jets. Then you go back to the Bills before to play the Bills before the bye week to kick off the month of November. The schedule's not going to get easier. You have a couple divisional matchups mixed in there. You want to get off that divisional losing streak, and I think that with no Tua, this is the time to do it. So I'm going to ask you a question. What does Wilson need to do? I think we've talked at length about the offensive line needing to step up. What does Wilson need to do to truly exploit that secondary and get the offense rolling outside of the 2-minute warning?
I think more than anything, what you need to see out of Zach Wilson this week is scoring early. I don't think it's about scoring in the second or the third, or even just not scoring in the last 2 minutes. I think it's about scoring in the first quarter. I think if the reason why this matchup is so pivotal, like you just alluded to, is the fact that it really doesn't get easier for the Jets from here. The only games that I'm looking at on their schedule that I really expect them to win left are Broncos. I expect them to beat the Bears. Those are the only 2 games where I look at it and I think, yeah, this isn't gonna, like, this is a game where I can reasonably expect them to win, and I'd be surprised if they didn't, frankly, just because of the dysfunction we've seen out of those 2 camps. But I think if you beat the Dolphins this season, this game, if you're able to go out even without Tua, not only have you broken the streak of losing against divisional rivals, but you're also showing that you really are in the hunt at that point. You're beating a team that is one of the better teams of the league right now, as a team that was expected to do nothing this year. So I think just to put the wind in the sails of the guys, if you go out and win this game and you win it early, you let's say you go into the half with 14 points and you're able to hold that lead throughout the rest of the game, even if the final is different. I think that now you have not only proven to the league that we're a different animal this year than we have been in the past with guys like Geno Smith and Josh McCown starting, but we're also capable. We're not just contending. We're not just in the pack. We're able to take down a team like Miami, and that gives the guys a reason to believe that we can go in and we can give Aaron Rodgers something to worry about. We can go in and work around this Patriots team that's not as strong as we've seen in recent years. We can go in and exploit the defense of the Detroit Lions. We can go I think it gives the guys a reason to buy into the culture that Robert Saleh talks about all the time. Something that I find really funny as a Jets fan is how often we hear Robert Saleh talk about the culture around the team and how he's trying to build a winning culture, but then they don't go out and win games. So it's really hard to talk about whether or not that was successful, even if every guy is wearing an all gas, no brakes t-shirt. But if you go out and win against the Miami Dolphins, a team that has been very good so far, then you can finally look at it and say, we're here. We are able to win football games on a consistent basis against teams that project to be better than us. Maybe you're not going to beat Aaron Rodgers, or maybe you're not going to beat guys like Josh Allen, who could very well be the Super Bowl champion this year, but you can go out and win football games, which is not something the Jets have been able to say for a while now.
Yeah, I agree, man. And it's funny to see that the Broncos are suddenly a victory on the schedule, because I think preseason a lot of people circled the Broncos as one of the better teams, going out and getting having a few weapons already, going out and getting Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson looks over the hill, man. And I have to talk about it because we're on the topic. That Colts Broncos game was brutal on Thursday. Local radio stations were coming on the air after the game and apologizing to listeners for having to listen to that game. It was kind of depressing to see two guys in Matt Ryan and Russell Wilson struggle as much as they did. For me, we've talked about Russell Wilson starting to become a meme almost. The videos of Broncos Country Let's Ride were hysterical before the season, and then we got what is easily the saddest Broncos Country Let's Ride after the game. He walks off the podium pouting, and he started walking up before he finished, and he realizes he has to come back and just kind of quietly yells to the mic like, "Let's ride." Just, you barely picked it up if you were watching. Just barely drops a "Let's Ride" into the microphone. Just such a sad state of affairs in Denver, and all of a sudden, like you said, that looks like a W on the schedule for the New York Jets.
Do you remember a few years ago? It might even be 5 years ago now. I think it was before Tom Brady had left the Patriots. Do you remember on ESPN's First Take how Max Kellerman had that whole Tom Brady plateau watch bit that he would do? He was seemingly convinced for 3 seasons in a row that all of a sudden Tom Brady was going to be over the hill and just plummet as a passer. I feel like that's where we're at with Russell Wilson now. Like everything he said about Tom Brady that ended up not being true, ended up being true about Russell Wilson, where one day the buck stopped. And it's kind of, it is depressing to watch. Like you said, it's hard to watch because Russell Wilson, for such a long time when he was in Seattle, was a likable guy too. He wasn't, he was a likable player. In fact, just last week, the NFL had a poll about the most likable players, and he was tied for first. So it's not like his dysfunction has the fan base turning against him as a human being, but you have to just, it's hard to watch. You knew that a changing of the guard was coming soon. just based on age. But it's hard. It's still hard to. It's one of those like never meet your heroes situations. It feels very much like
almost,
the end of the ride. No pun intended for Russell Wilson.
End of the ride, Jesus. So for Wilson, it has been interesting. I agree. He comes off a little cheesy at times, but when you're the face of a franchise and you aren't supposed to be a guy who shows a lot of negative energy, he's the guy you want. Why wouldn't you want that guy leading your team, especially during his peak when the results spoke for themselves? The cheesy kind of played. Now all of a sudden you're like, dude, can you shut up about the Broncos? Let Broncos country, let's ride thing, please. My goodness, man, we're tortured here. We don't want to hear let's ride. Just win a game, something, right? So I understand the frustration coming out of Broncos country, and hopefully they can start riding with some better results shortly. Let's take a moment, step away from the Jets. I'd like to hop over to some Giants talk, if you are so inclined, Jacob. We're gonna hop over. Let's get some Giants. Where are we? The Giants. One thing I can say about the Giants, the fact that they are 3-1 is absolutely stunning to me. I don't think anybody, including any serious Giants fan, thought that there was any chance in hell that this team would be 3-1. They got some help with the Dak Prescott injury and having to face Cooper Rush. But all of a sudden, Barkley looks all the way back. A guy who we thought may have been a waste of a pick a few years ago. The man is all the way back. He's leading the league in rushing yards, 463 yards, getting some help out of the backfield, 15 catches, 107 yards out of the backfield. All of a sudden, that pick looks like it is not a waste anymore. These top 10 picks, we talked a little bit last week about how the top 10 picks may not have been spent the right way that they've had recently, with Daniel Jones. Although it's awesome that Barkley is leading the league in rushing, the running back position is almost a committee approach everywhere in the league. It's not as pivotal, have that one standout guy as it used to be. So have they been spending their high picks the right way? They are starting to build through the line a little bit, which is what you need to do, especially this new regime. I think that they're building the right way, and not to always bring it back to the Eagles, but look at what they did, right? They went out and when they saw flashes that Carson might not be the guy, they go out and draft Jalen Hurts in the second round instead of getting a weapon, which confused a lot of people. And now you see what Jalen Hurts is doing. And because of where he was drafted, you ended up saving a lot of money at the quarterback position as well. We're not going to talk about the sunk cost from the Carson trade that they had, but Barkley's all the way back. Dexter Lawrence on the defensive side, 15 pressures, only one behind Aaron Donald. He has been a great pick. 7 QB hits. Pro Football Focus has him the highest graded pass rusher at defensive tackle. So although it's a shock that they're 3-1, they do have bright spots. Daniel Bellinger, a tight end, especially with all the injuries and all just the lack of what seems like lack of talent from the wide receiver position, at least with what they've shown so far. Daniel Bellinger, 8 catches, 79 yards, and being crucial in the blocking game as well. Dexter Lawrence looking even more impressive with Leonard Williams missing 2 games and still being able to put that pressure up. Teams are more likely to be able to double team him, and he's still being able to put the pressure on. They head to London tomorrow to play the Packers. And then they head out after they likely get defeated by the Packers in London and Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. They got to come back to the States and take on the Ravens and the Jags. Jags no longer a joke in the league. Doug Peterson. Let's go get some ice cream after the victories. Eagles fans, you know what I'm talking about. 2 tough matchups after another tough matchup tomorrow. So Giants, it may look exciting. It may be a surprise that they're 3-1. But not looking good moving forward for the New York Football Giants.
Yeah, I think that it's very – I want to come out here and say that the Giants are in the same spot as the Jets this week and have a real test ahead of them to see how good they are. You can say that if you want to be very optimistic about this Packers matchup. That being said – obviously, the Packers are the odds-on favorites to win this game. I will give the Giants a little credit, though. They are not they're the last team in the NFL to see a London game, and something they're going to learn real fast as a Jets London regular. Those games get weird. It gets real weird playing a game at 9 in the morning, over in a different time zone in a different country. That you never really expect what's going to happen there. There's always some weird wild card factor, and I think that maybe, just maybe, that might help the Giants. But overall, yeah, I think that you want to see. You don't necessarily think you're going to see a win, but you want to see steps from the defense to show that they can bother a guy like Aaron Rodgers, or at least his receiving core, especially because you're going to rely so heavily on Saquon Barkley tomorrow. Saquon Barkley is, as usual with this season, going to be your offense because we have such a lackluster receiver core for the Giants. It is a sad state of affairs when you were leaving Kenny Golladay behind in this, the guy that you just paid so much money for. It is a sad state of affairs when Odell Beckham Jr. is taking meetings with you because you need that veteran receiver. So I think that it's tough, and I don't expect the Giants to make that much noise, but you hope they make some. You hope to show that they can at least keep it competitive through the first half, I think, is really what you're hoping for as a Giants fan. I will say that a lot of my family are Giants fans. My 3 younger brothers are all Giants fans. I'm the one Jets fan of the 4 of us, and I do think that it's you're doing a lot better than you would have expected. Obviously, I know that going into this offseason, my brothers were telling me that God, they were almost jealous of me because being a Giants fan is the most painful football team to be a fan of. To which I say, you have 2 rings in your lifetime. Please be quiet. But please, like back in my day, and get up as if I saw Joe Namath win. Yeah, I think that you're in a good spot as a team. You have bright spots. You have a bright future, I would say, on the defensive side of things. But tomorrow, I don't know how you look at it and not think, well, I just hope we keep it a 1-possession game. That's pretty much the bottom line. I don't think that you can expect much against Aaron Rodgers because it's always going to be Aaron Rodgers is going to be one of those players who kind of retires before he retires. I think once he I think that I think that he's going to retire still kind of at the top of the game kind of guys. So you just hope that you can't hope to contain him. You can only hope to slow him down, you know?
Yeah, I completely agree. And we'll talk a little bit more Aaron Rodgers and how he might not be the same guy. But still, I agree, near the top of the game. Before we get into that, though, I got to ask you, how on earth? So I thought you made it seem like you were born into Jets fandom, but it sounds like your family is split. I got to know, how on earth did you end up as a Jets fan when your family's Giants fans?
Just simple math on some stuff. For some context, for some Jacob Gardner guy behind the glass lore, for those of you who are also interested in the night shift with Stephen Florival every Monday through Friday, 9 at midnight, send tweet. So the Giants part of my family there's 2 sides. There's my cousins who their father is a Giants Yankees fan, and there's also my brothers because my stepfather who raised them was a big Giants fan as well. That's really his big team, the G-Men. So they were raised watching the Giants. I was raised watching the Jets. They also, just to add a little more spice to things, my family down south, they are big Carolina Hurricanes fans. They were actually just at the Panthers preseason game. They go to playoff games regularly. They're also, while I am I'm a Rangers fan, while I am a big Duke fan, they are all NC State all the way. There's definitely some derision amongst me and my family about who roots for who. So while they were born into Giants and still Rangers and not really caring about baseball, I was born through my side of the family. I was born into Jets, Knicks, Rangers, and Mets. But because their father is a Giants fan, they ended up with the Giants. We butt heads a little bit. And at the end of the day, I can always say, You have 2 rings. I don't want to hear anything about how hard your life has been.
Yeah, I feel you, man. It's funny how sometimes it comes down to what we've seen in our lifetime, right? I know that obviously it's a little bit different when you have 2 teams in the same city, but some of my best friends are from the Boston area, and every single time they complain about sports, I'm like, do not open your mouth about sports right now. Boston has so many championships in your lifetime. I don't care how long the Red Sox couldn't get it done. I don't care if you're from Chicago. Chicago, obviously a different story, really getting it done in the NFL, or excuse me, the NHL. You are not the you're not the lovable losers that you once were. I know that phrase is usually reserved for the Cubs specifically, but like it's not the same. And you've won so many championships across every single sport. It cannot be. You can't give me that garbage. You cannot tell me that you're this upset over some stumbles or some losses here and there. Excuse me. Before we get more into the Giants matchup with the Packers, just wanted to remind everybody you are listening to the Call Sports New York. My name is Kyle Fisher. We got Jacob Gardner on the ones and twos, doing the producing. Stellar job so far. Listen to the Call Sports New York, your home for ad-free, interruption-free, break-free New York sports talk. That's right, all day, day sports talk. Right now we're talking Giants, Packers. We just got done some Jets, Dolphins talk. But if you're interested in joining the conversation, we encourage it. I want you to join the conversation. I love having conversations with sports fans. I love talking sports. I'm not just going to hang up on you, bang on you, tell you why you're wrong, yell at you. I'm not that type of guy. Please join the conversation. Let's have some fun talking sports. The number to call in or text in is 917-793-1717. Make sure you're following the station on Twitter at The Call Sports, myself at Kyle Fisher45. To get all your latest New York sports talk, and from my perspective, a little bit of Philly sports talk on Twitter at least. So join the conversation. Don't be discouraged just because you hear me and Jacob killing the game here for the last 2 hours. We got about an hour and a half left, a little bit more than an hour and a half left. We're into the 13th inning. Tampa Bay versus Cleveland. Nasty curveball from Hedges right there. 13th inning of that ball game. Obviously, the winner of this series is going to be the Yankees' next opponent. Excuse me. So pivotal matchup for New York fans to be watching closely. So we're going to hop back over to some Giants and some Packers talk. Packers dominate historically. Game's going to be overseas, as we mentioned. Green Bay has won 3 straight games against the Giants, but prior to that, the Giants had won 3 straight against Green Bay as well. So recent memory, been a hotly contested. I know Aaron Rodgers running the show, getting them 3 straight. First ever matchup in London between 2 teams with a winning record. So hang your hat on that, Giants fans. Again, shocked that you're 3-1, but here we go with a winning record entering London. Giants have been to London twice, back in 2007 and 2016, victories both times. Again, first time that they've had a winning record entering, so they played some poor teams last time. Packers good. Aaron Rodgers trying to build the brand, wants to go show people what he's all about, and he's probably likely to show out against the Giants. Packers first ever time that they've gone over to London, as we know how good they've been under Aaron Rodgers. Like we said, first time the 2 winning teams have been over to London to face each other. Rodgers, again, we know what he is, but maybe you're starting to see some signs. And I think he, like you said, he's going to be a guy who doesn't want to retire. He wants to retire near the top as opposed to retiring kind of how Peyton Manning did. Sometimes you don't have control over that, but he's not quite there yet. Thrown an interception in back-to-back games. Doesn't happen often for Rodgers. He has 3 interceptions so far this season, only had 4 all of last season. So again, the 4 that he had last season, that is such an amazing effort, such an incredible season he had last year. You can't really say that this is them falling off at all, or him falling off rather. But it's starting to show signs of vulnerability maybe with this new look offense, especially without the same receivers that he had last year. Lowest passing yards per game of his career as a starter so far this season, just under 234 passing yards per game, completing 69% of his passes. So even though he doesn't have the deep threat that he used to, still near the top of the league in completion percentage. Aaron Jones, if you haven't been watching him, if you don't play fantasy football, what is you doing, baby? Watch Aaron Jones. He is so fun to watch. I know we talked about how that can be kind of a replaceable position at this point, but Aaron Jones, 2 games over 100 rushing yards this season. He's only one of 6 players with multiple 100 rushing yard games this season so far. Saquon is also one of those guys, I believe. We talked about A.J. Dillon, 17 rushes, 73 yards last week. 8 carries came in the fourth quarter and overtime. So if you happen to be able to stop Aaron Jones, you have that change of pace and A.J. Dillon waiting for you in the backfield. It's going to be a challenge for the Giants, man. It really is. If Lawrence can continue to step up, I don't believe Williams is going to be back for this game. I can check on the injury report in a moment. But if they can slow the running game down a little bit, you may have a chance of, not that their secondary is anything to write home about, but you may be able to take advantage of, like we said, it's tough to play that early game in London. It's a different country, different feel. The question is going to be, what can they do to I wouldn't say struggling, but a taking a step back Aaron Rodgers. Rodgers' targets maybe not at the lights out guys that he had the last few years, but Allen Lazard has been really strong so far this season, stepping up in a big way. I like this stat that I saw. Over 90% of his catches have gone for a first down or a touchdown this season. Allen Lazard, huge when you have a player like that who can be relied on in a spot where you need him to get the next step, where you need him to get that touchdown, where you need him to get that first down. Really huge that you have someone on the roster who can do that. And then the rookie Romeo Doubs, has a touchdown in back-to-back games. He's the first Packers rookie with receiving touchdowns in back-to-back games since Rodgers in 2014. No Packers rookie has done it in 3 straight games back to the NFC-AFC merger. So Doubs showing what he can do. I know it sounds ridiculous because we know that he's had weapons in Davante Adams, and he's had MVS, he's had a few guys who can be burners, but Doubs, one of the complaints for Packer fans and Rodgers fans has always been, you got to give the man weapons. And it looks like Doubs is able to kind of help Rodgers maintain that fountain of youth that he's shown over the years. Jacob, I don't know if you are familiar with the Packers offense in a really deep way like that. We know about the 2 running backs. We know how good Dillon can be, even if Jones gets slowed, which is rare. But it looks like he has some weapons out there, even with him taking, slowing down a little bit. Again, nowhere near what we talked about with some guys falling off I mentioned, Peyton Manning kind of falling off a cliff. We talked about Russell Wilson maybe falling off a cliff. Matt Ryan looking to be struggling a lot recently.
Yeah, I mean,
Rodgers.
Yeah, go ahead.
Rodgers, he's lowest of his career as a starter passing yards per game so far, but he has weapons and he's relying on that running game a little bit more to ensure that he stays relevant for as long as possible.
Right, and I think that's part of the key too to why he's losing some of those passing yards is because he is relying on that run game, and also dealing with the fact that he lost Davante Adams, his go-to, really the Robin to his Batman in the offseason. A guy that had a penchant for being open for the deep ball too. So a lot of those monster 50-yard touchdown passes that we used to see are just not going to be there as he develops chemistry with some of these younger guys. But I'm not super familiar with the Packers' offensive schemes just because I don't play the Packers a ton. But I do think that we are. I'm not too worried about Rodgers taking a step back to the running game. I'm also not worried about them this weekend at all, frankly. But I think that the fact of the matter is that the guy that really was his deep ball partner, being a Raider now, means that he's going to means that he's going to have to adapt to that, and I think that he's showing the ability to do it for sure. Remember, it was only a few weeks ago at the start of the season where we were saying, "Oh man, the Packers officially cooked. You can't do anything with the weapons that you've put around Aaron Rodgers. They're not nearly as good as what he had even last season, and they're 3-1. So I'm not really too worried about any of it. I think it's just a growing pains process for an old dog that might have to learn a few new tricks because of the personnel around him.
Yeah, I agree, and I hear this term a lot. I'm a big fan of the Dan Le Batard show. Politics aside, I think their sports coverage is very great. They always talk about the fountain of youth for these older guys, and one way to establish the fountain of youth is to rely on that running game, and I think that you're going to see them do that a lot against the Giants tomorrow morning. Giants have. Against the passing game, they've actually been pretty strong, and especially if Lazard, I know he was on the injury report as questionable. I think he's leaning towards playing, but if for some reason he can't go or isn't 100%, you're really going to see Jones and Dillon try and exploit that poor Giants rushing defense. Giants are top 10 in passing yards per game, just under 200 at 191 yards per game. But on the other end, they're allowing 141 rushing yards per game. So really going to be a challenge for them to slow down that obvious and dominant rushing attack in Jones and Dillon. I mean, it really is, for how good Jones is, Dillon is right there, and they've become a really strong two-headed monster.
Yeah, I do think that it's another one of those things where you can't hope to stop him. You can only hope to contain him. I think that the Giants
exactly.
The Giants are in a tough spot, but I just want to say, for the public record, the same way that I went on the public record last night to talk about how up until the other runs were scored, last night's loss to the Padres for the Mets was not their fault. I want it on the public record that if the Giants lose tomorrow, it is not due to being a bad team. I think that for every good team, there has to be a great team, and I think that it's really hard to judge a team's success when they are out there playing some of the best, a future first ballot Hall of Famer. End of the discussion for me. Bottom line is that the Giants are still in a place that we did not expect them to be. They can't fall into the trap of being ahead of schedule that we've seen other New York teams. Looking at you, Knicks, falling into that trap of, well, we're ahead of schedule, so it's not that we can just go about business as usual, but that they are for now ahead of schedule, and assuming that either Daniel Jones can prove that he deserves that starting spot in a real way once they get hopefully some receiver help, and just the general defensive rookies progressing. I think that you have to like what you see. You just have to accept, though, that you are not a Super Bowl contender this year. You might not be a 3-win season like you might have expected, some of these Giants fans, but you are better than what you thought you were. You're just not the best team in the league yet, and that's okay. You don't have to be. Daniel Jones does not have to run the best team in the league. You can be a little bit ahead of the pack, or a little bit behind of the pack in that regard. You still have a lot of young guys to develop around who are going to get better. So I don't really think there's any cause for alarm even if you get blown out tomorrow. I think that the worst piece of news you could get out of tomorrow is if somebody gets hurt, God forbid.
Yeah, I mean, a big question. I know that he's shown being healthy as of late, but impressive game on the ground last week. But Daniel Jones, he's listed as probable, but he is on the injury report. He'll likely be the starter, but what do you have behind him, right? Tyrod Taylor, who's currently in concussion protocol. You got to go all the way down to Davis Webb, who's never thrown a pass in a regular season game. Third round pick from the Giants back in 2017. What can he give you if for some reason the ankle injury for Jones pops up during the game? But I think the key is, and like you said, it's not going to be a Daniel Jones needs to be the future of this franchise. I think you got your answer that he's not going to be the future by them not picking up that 5th-year option. It's pretty standard, for especially for quarterbacks, to have their rookie 5th-year option picked up, and they have already declined his. But if you continue to build through the draft, if you continue to build these young core pieces, you can have somebody like a Tyrod Taylor when he's not in concussion protocol, obviously, run the show until you find that quarterback of the future. And so you find that guy who's going to be able to run the show for you moving forward. We'll see how that injury situation plays out. But looking at, we talked about Aaron Jones being a one of 4 guys with 100-yard rushing games this season, and how Barkley's one of the other guys. Coming up on the schedule is the Ravens, and Lamar Jackson is one of those other guys as well. So it's not going to get any easier for them. I don't know how much we can really talk about this particular matchup, right? I don't want to talk in circles. I don't want to repeat ourselves too much, but it is next up on the docket. It's the first game that everybody who watches all NFL all day Sunday is going to watch tomorrow. And I could see it being a blowout pretty easily. But the key for Giants fans to remain hopeful, I think, similar to how we talked about when Tua was healthy, that Jets fans were almost looking at this game like a wash, and you just want to see how guys improve and how they perform, as opposed to hoping that they're going to win. I think that's really what Giants fans are going to be watching for this week. If Jones can come all the way back healthy, though, we'll see. He may not have been extremely impressive last week, because I don't think he's ever extremely impressive, especially in the passing game. Only had 71 yards passing last week, but he had 68 rushing yards and rushed for 2 touchdowns last week. Again, against the lowly Chicago Bears. We know, we talk about how good is your good. We know how bad their bad can be. But if Jones is healthy, you at least get to see what he can do against kind of a step up in competition, and see how your team, a shocking 3-1 Giants team, can really line up against what should be considered the top tier competition in the NFC and the Packers.
Yeah, I think I don't know how much more we can talk about this matchup, just because, you're not a Giants fan, I'm not a Giants fan, neither of us are Packers fan either. So obviously some of these guys will know it a little better than us. But yeah, I think that Daniel Jones, like I said earlier on the program, kind of fills that Mark Sanchez role right now, ironically, given it's a New York sports team. It was a little surprising to me that he did not get the 5th-year option, just because, like you said, it's standard. That being said, I think it is a step forward for the Giants organization to recognize that there might be another guy on the horizon that you want more. And normally I would be on the side of, I don't think it's right that we're rushing a quarterback out the way that a lot of teams do right now. We saw that Sam Darnold got rushed a little bit. I don't think he really ever got the chance to shine in New York, or really show what he had in New York. As much as I wasn't the biggest Sam Darnold fan, you see guys, guys are really expected to be their best selves by year 3 now, and so that's why I was a little surprised that we're not seeing the option from. Normally, that's where I would go to as my argument, seeing Daniel Jones not get the option. But we've seen, while we've seen a better Daniel Jones this year because of the reliance on the run game. The fact of the matter is that what we've seen from Daniel Jones as a Giant is some poor pass judgment in terms of a lot of interceptions. We've seen an inability to stay healthy at times, which, again, not entirely his fault, but still something you have to consider in terms of personnel. And we've seen a guy who seems to be filling a hole until someone greater can step in. And I think that it's a step in the right direction that the Giants, who just had Mike Maccagnan as their GM, can recognize that as a weakness and try to find a way to make it into a strength. And to the people who think that this is fine because Daniel Jones is starting to get rushing yards, this is not sustainable because of his health. And in the same way, relying on Saquon Barkley to be your offense is not sustainable either. No matter how much of a return to form we're seeing this season, I think he's a lock for best comeback player award. But that being said, you cannot in good faith, send out a guy who for a while was considered to have glass legs to get all of your offensive production. And I think that while you like what you're seeing this year, you have to treat it as an anomaly if you're a Giants fan.
Which is crazy that he's known to have glass legs. Have you seen his legs? They're built like brick walls. It's insane. I mean, he's the quad father for a reason, right? Just to do a little bit of Saquon. So obviously, like you said, we can't assume that it's going to be sustainable long term. But just to put how impressive his season so far has been into perspective, and I agree, he's leading candidate for comeback player of the year. Barkley, the last 2 seasons, played in 15 games, rushed for a total of 627 yards, 2 rushing touchdowns. So far this season, in 4 games, already 463 yards, also 2 touchdowns, running at a 5.5 yards per rush, 2 yards higher than the last 2 years combined on average. He seemed to found it again, and maybe maybe it's him just being fully healthy for the first time in a long time. Maybe you can combine that with the fact that they've spent some draft picks smartly on that offensive line to help that game go along. Other things you can be excited about I'm going to touch on some other things you can be excited about as a Giants fan watching this game. But real quick, just a little quick station ID. You're listening to the Call Sports New York. You're home for ad-free, interruption-free, break-free New York sports talk. That's right, just 24/7 sports talk, baby. You're listening to Kyle Fisher, Jacob Gardner on the ones and twos. If you want to join the conversation about the Giants, if you want to revisit the Jets, if you want to pine over how you feel about the Mets going into tonight's game, give us a call. Give us a text. The number is 917-793-1717. Hit us on Twitter at the Call Sports.
I'm going to go ahead and put an emphasis on pining over the Mets right now because I don't know if you're paying attention. You have Twitter open, but the Mets just announced that Darren Ruff will be starting as your DH over Francisco Alvarez.
Hey!
So if you want to
stand out,
if you want to talk about Darren Ruff over Francisco Alvarez, feel free to call in at that number. Just to make sure you heard it right. It's 917-793-1717.
Why on earth is he in the lineup? Oh my God.
Buck Showalter.
This is incredible.
To answer your question, Buck Showalter has excused himself by saying, in quotes, I'm putting that in big quotes, excused himself by pointing to Darren Ruff's success against Blake Snell, whatever that means to you. I believe he was 3 for 3 in his last game against him. But overall, I as much as I have been a big opponent towards people resting their hopes on Francisco Alvarez, the kid is in such a bad spot right now. It's not fair that he's expected to be the Mets savior this late in the game. I don't think that you want to give it to Darren Ruff either, who has had less than 20 hits since the deadline. I mean, come on. It almost feels if tonight they do not win this game, which I already said I don't think they will, that will be viewed as the biggest raising of a white flag that I can even think of in recent memory for a contending team. It's a rough spot. It's a rough look for Buck Showalter.
Man, Darren Ruff in the lineup. So you know what? I do like Buck going to recent memory. You know, Ruff, if he has success against Snell, again, you're putting Alvarez in a tough spot, having him called up, and then having to put him in an important spot in the lineup and maybe rely on him in the DH role. Just Darren Ruff has hit 152 since coming over with no home runs. I mean, it's the reason you called Alvarez up is because he struggled so much. And here you are with Ruff in the lineup. Now, granted, he's near the bottom, batting right above catcher Nito, behind Escobar, who's been hot as of late. McNeil, the batting title, hitting in the middle of that lineup. So it's not like you're putting him in the biggest of spots, but it is alarming that Darren Ruff has is getting the start in the lineup tonight. I'd almost, even against the lefty, I'd almost rather put the refrigerator and Daniel Vogelbach out there. Quick check-in. We are now in the 14th inning of the Rays-Guardians matchup. Arozarena at the dish. Strikes out on a curveball. First out of the inning, man on first for Tampa Bay. This one extending into almost a second full game of a wonderful pitches.
This almost feels,
Yanks fans, you're tiring them out.
Yeah, this almost you got to be kind of jumping up in the air and clicking your heels if you're a Yankees fan, because even if you get the Rays, which I don't think you want them, these teams are going to be so dog tired once they get to you that you've got to kind of rest. You got to sleep a little easier knowing that these guys are going to, not only if the Guardians win, then they're coming off of 23 innings of baseball and counting. But if the Rays win, if the Rays come out of the series, then you're taking a team that played at least 32 innings of baseball before coming to you, and just from a stamina perspective, how do you work up the courage to go in on Tuesday and play game one against the Yankees, a team that is also known from a pitching perspective, because you know that the Yankees are going to be big boppers. I think that if you're a Yankees fan, you've got to be resting a little easier tonight, even if you do end up facing the Rays.
I agree, and I know we've kind of gone off tangent. We can come back to the Giants in a little bit, but I want to stay where we're at right now. Looking at the one thing, a lot of people talk about how the current thing is, the current schedule for the wild card round, 3 straight games, no breaks in between, might be hectic and could be demoralizing for a bullpen. But looking at the second round, right, if say it does go 3 games and a strike him out, throw him out, double play to end the inning for the Rays. Oh man, what a play. Okay, sorry. I have the game on in the room. Man, strike him out, throw him out, double play. Wander Franco, no. Okay, but we have a break after Sunday, right? So the first game for the Yanks versus the eventual winner. We're going to have 1 day off there. And then even though it's a best of 5 series, we take another break between games 1 and 2. So you will have an opportunity, if you can get one starter to go long on one of those 2 games, to kind of rest up the bullpen a little bit, but still adding additional innings into these 2 teams who already have relied on the pitching so heavily. I agree. It might not be a crazy impact, but you're going to be clicking your heels if you're a Yankees fan watching this. To finish up the conversation on the Giants, and again, we can come back to it, but one thing that I know we stepped away from it for a moment, but I want to make sure I get this point out while I'm thinking of it. Darren Rough Country, let's ride, from a Twitter listener. There we go. Oh man, at Trey Lindor 20, excuse me. I love it. Love the reference, man. Please keep tweeting at us. It's great. Oh man, that Darren Rough Country Let's Ride is about as sad as Russell Wilson said Broncos Country Let's Ride as he walked off the podium on Thursday night. Oh man. One more note about the Giants before we move on to another topic. So Richie James, receiver for the Giants. We know you talked about Galladay and how much money was spent and leaving him behind. Richie James hasn't caught over 23 balls in his young career after 3 years with the Giants, not playing in 2020, 3 years with the Niners, not playing in 2021. Has 15 receptions so far for the Giants, tied for the team leads the team in receiving yards with 155. Again, not jumping off the page, not making an insane impact, but somebody who's already making some noise and taking advantage of the limited time. So if you're a Giants fan watching this game tomorrow, you may be depressed knowing that you're likely going to lose that contest, but there's some positives to look for. Can Saquon continue his torrid pace so far? Can Richie James really become a weapon for Daniel Jones or whomever is going to take over the passing attack for the Giants? All right, so we're going to come back to the Giants in a little bit. We touched on baseball for a moment, and I want to come back to baseball just for a little bit. So we talked about the lineup tonight. Man, Darren Ruff in the lineup for the Mets. You have Nimmo leading off. Marte gets moved up to the 2-hole. He'll be in right field. Lindor 3, Alonso 4, Kana 5. Not surprising there. McNeil dropped down to 6th. Eddie Escobar, who has been up and down all season, but very hot as of late, been clutch down the stretch for the Mets in the moments that they did have that were clutch. Darren Ruff, and then Nito wrapping up the bottom of the lineup. I have a question for you about the catching position for the Mets.
Yeah.
Before we get into the series itself. So you have Nido there now. We know that there was a big talk about them potentially going after JT Realmuto, and they end up settling for the cheaper option in McCann. McCann hasn't been what they bargained for. You know, we talked about spending money smartly. That seemed to be an area where they could have improved, and now you have the young kid in Alvarez who could potentially be a catcher of the future. I'm not sure if he's going to be a catcher for very long, but he can definitely get the job done for now. What's your take on the catcher position? How much of a disappointment has McCann been? Is that really talked about that much in Mets fandom?
I would say that on any given day, besides like even when the Mets are being good, besides when there's something like a real time lapse of judgment to talk about, i.e., talking about Max Scherzer starting last night, or talking about when the Mets don't give DeGrom run support, which is fairly a common talking point amongst the Mets fans. I would say on any given day, except for those, James McCann would be your enemy number one. So I will say, I will say that I think that it's tough because I think everyone likes Nido. Nido, believe it or not, can be a fan favorite at times for his ability to bunt. He's the leading bunter in the league. Say with that,
yes,
that what you will.
Bring back the bunt, baby.
It beats
Small
the shift.
ball.
It beats the shift.
Yes, it does.
But I think that you're stuck with you're kind of at a weird impasse with McCann and Alvarez because because they both do things well at opposite ends of the spectrum and are not so good at the things that they're supposed to meet in the middle on. McCann, for every lack of offense that we get from him, which is incredibly frustrating. I am not a McCann fan by any means. His defensive arm is something that runners have to respect, so it's hard to devalue that. It's hard to say, oh yeah, this is something that like he's completely washed. We don't want him on the team because he does provide you that kind of defense. And Alvarez, while he is a fantastic hitter, we've seen every at bat he gets a little better since he's been called up. And in the minors, he was just tearing it up from the offensive side of things. His defense needs shoring up, so it's hard to look at that. That being said, I think that the straw that breaks the camel's back for me with McCann is that pitchers have come out and said that they don't like pitching to McCann. That Scherzer in particular has been a vocal opponent, as much as a vocal opponent of a teammate as you can be, of playing with McCann. And that's why Nido started yesterday, because him and McCann have lapses in communication pretty constantly, seemingly on signs. So, and we see too in that Brave series, if you look at the tape, McCann's signs got stolen pretty fairly consistently by Braves players. You see it happen on second base. There's tape of them doing their code for sign stealing. We can now assume is scratching their head on second base. There's enough film of that from that game.
I saw the video of that on Twitter.
Yeah, and that was against McCann. I think that Scherzer has made it pretty clear he doesn't like McCann. DeGrom seems to like McCann a little more. But one thing that's common between the two of them is when they were making rehab starts down in Binghamton, they both raved about playing with Alvarez. They said that he's the next big thing. They love working with him, stuff like that. So I think just for me, the catalyst there is going to be that Francisco Alvarez will be a more consistent catcher. I think they're going to find a way to move McCann. They've shown with the Cano situation that they're willing to make the baseball decision as opposed to the financial one. So I think that McCann is not long for this Mets team. I think that is the attitude of the fan base as well. And really, we're just ready to see an offseason where Alvarez tries to shore up that defense. Not that he's horrendous at it, but he can use some work. And then we can finally see a team with Alvarez behind the plate consistently, something that Mets fans have been clamoring for since this last offseason, really.
Yeah, man, it was a surprise because, you know, I remember that offseason being a big talking point. You know, which of these catchers do you want to go after? Both guys had great years in 2019. McCann had another solid year in the shortened season in 2020. So, it's funny because I know that he was a little bit older when he kind of had that peak, right? He had 18 homers, 26 doubles back in 2019, made the All-Star game. Excuse me. And then, hit 289 with a 360 on base in 2020 in the shortened season, putting up another 7 bombs. And then just really fell off the table completely after coming to the Mets. I don't know if it's the factor of he got a little bit older and maybe, he hit that peak at his age 29 and age 30 seasons, being on the other side of 30, did he just slow down a little bit? Maybe his knees taking taking a beating behind there, playing catcher for so long. I know he does have the arm, and I appreciate you pointing that out because I think that gets lost a lot of times when talking about catchers. Because so many catchers are just big boppers nowadays. It's not like it used to be where that was really a primary defensive position. I mean, you can see guys who are primary defensively make a difference, but so many guys have like a Cal Raleigh back there who's not, miserable defensively, but really known for his bat. Overall. So we do have a caller on the line. Looks like David wants to get in and talk some sports with us on the Call Sports Network. So Dave, what do you got for us?
Hey Kyle, how's it going, man? I'm just want to talk a little bit of wild card weekend for baseball. First time we can say that. Just wanted to get what your thoughts were. Probably just focused on Mets and Phillies. Obviously two very different results in game one, and I'm sure you've been talking about it all day, but I guess we'll start with the Mets. What's going on with them? Scherzer seems like he's got the dead arm again. Looks like they're going to go with DeGrom to sort of try to save the season, but it almost feels like a dead team to me that's kind of losing its life a little bit. So I don't know what you think about that.
I agree, man. So Jacob is the producer on the line for us, Dave. I'm not sure how long you were listening for. He's a Mets fan himself, and he told us earlier in the show, I do not feel good about tonight if I'm a Mets fan. DeGrom, we know he's been good in the limited time he's had this season, but his last month stumbling again, right? You're talking about maybe Scherzer having some signs of fatigue and dead arm. A 6.0 ERA in his last month for DeGrom. With the season on the line, is that the guy you want to go to, or do you think maybe they should have stuck with the original plan of potentially going Bassett and going with Mr. Reliable? He's been there all season through all the injuries for the other guys. You want your big arm. You want DeGrom. He's the guy. He's the 2-time Cy Young winner. You want him on the mound, but I could see it being an early leash, man. If he gets into some trouble, you could definitely see Bassett coming out. Scherzer just imploding. I mean, I've never seen anything like that from him in game one. I think the biggest surprise was that offense from the Padres that kind of sputtered into the postseason, all of a sudden just exploding on a guy like Mad Max. I know you're Dave. Who's your allegiance to? I know you said you want to talk Mets and Phillies. Who's your allegiance to?
So I'm actually a Braves fan. So I'm kind of
okay.
looking forward a little bit to the next round. So I want to talk a little bit of Phillies Cardinals too. But obviously we just had a huge series with the Mets, and I saw firsthand that their starting pitching, which had the billing coming into the season as that's their strength, right? Perhaps people would argue that was the number 1 and 2 best pitchers period in the entire league. And for them to be sputtering at this time of year, and I know Dodgers fans feel that too with Max and his dead arm at the end of last year. I still feel like you got to go with DeGrom, right? You paid the guy all the money. He's your marquee guy. If I was a Mets fan, it would be hard for me to sit with that, to be okay. We went out, lost 2-0 against the Padres, and we didn't even give DeGrom a shot. I know his stuff's been a little flat. He's still throwing 100 miles an hour, 101 miles an hour in that Braves series, and it's not like Chris Bassett did much better. He got lit up a little bit by that Braves lineup, which happens to a lot of pitchers because it's a great lineup. But yeah, it's been a tough watch, I'm sure, for a lot of Mets fans, and I follow like Frank the Tank from Barstool on Instagram, and then kind of it was fun to sort of watch the tears come down when the Braves beat him, but now it's almost a little bit sad. So I'm hoping they rally back and at least make this a good series. And then I also think the Mets have a better chance to take out the Dodgers, who would be a potential opponent for the Braves down the line. So I'd be all in for that as well. So yeah, I got the big guys going. I mean, Francisco Lindor, he didn't hit the ball at all in that Braves series. He's been amazing all year long. He went 0 for 3 again yesterday. So I think if they get some guys on base early on and get some early runs, get some confidence. But if they get into a big hole again, I mean, I think the season's probably over.
Yeah, especially like, dude, the energy in Citi Field just died so quickly, and I think that the team really felt that. And I think that if you can get, we were talking earlier in the show, if they can get that pitch count up on Snell early and get to the middle part of that Padres bullpen, it's going to be a long night for them if they can't do that. You know, Snell's been money as of late, and I don't know if you saw, they have Darren Ruff going at the DH tonight, with the season on the line, trying out something. The guy's hit 152 since coming over to the Mets. We'll move on. We're going to talk more Mets after we drop. But while you're on the line, Phillies, Cardinals. Phillies look like they can't get a single thing going against Quintana and that strong Cardinals bullpen. Then all of a sudden, getting a few balls eking through the infield, past the Gold Glovers, put up 6 in the 9th inning. It's one of the most improbable victories in all season for the Phillies, and especially in recent postseason memory. You know, getting a strong start to the wild card weekend. Aaron Nola on the bump for the Phillies tonight. His incredible outing to end the season, 6 2/3, perfect against the strong Houston Astros lineup. As a Braves fan who's been able to watch the Phillies and maybe see the Phillies do a little bit better against the Braves than maybe some folks, Atlanta fans, expected, what's your thoughts watching that Phillies game and knowing that Nola is getting hot right now, going on the bump tonight?
Yeah, no, it was, I mean, especially against Helsley, like crazy impressive comeback. Kind of played a little bit of Mets ball there, right? Like a bunch of singles, death by singles, long at bats, fighting pitches off. Really just an impressive kind of gritty performance by the Phillies there. I don't think, right, because you talked about the great defense, the Cardinals, I don't think you can really repeat that model, right? Because you had a couple that kind of snuck by, one snuck by Edman, one snuck by Arenado. Those are Gold Glove guys. You know, Arenado's a Platinum Glove guy. So you got to expect that defense is going to come back. But now, you know, the Phillies have a huge advantage now with that game one. And I think, they're coming in and shutting the door with Nola. And I think it's the right decision. I know some people were talking, hey, why don't we save Nola for the division series and maybe go with Ranger or something like that for game 2. But as a Braves fan, I mean, Rangers going toe to toe with Max Fried the last 2 times they've played. And those were both September matchups. So it's pretty recent. So he's got to have a lot of confidence against this Braves lineup. And we've actually, hit Nola around a little bit in his entire career. So I think the Braves lineup is pretty confident versus Nola. So I think, Nola's pitching well right now. Throw him out here. Make sure you win the game today. Then you can rest your bullpen for an extra day before the series starts on Tuesday. And I think that's the move. So if I was, as a Braves fan, I was kind of hoping they would go with Ranger, and then maybe have to go in series, then have to throw Nola tomorrow, and then then the Braves are really set up because the Phillies will be going with whoever, Syndergaard or Eflin or someone like that, which is not who you want to be throwing out in the first game of an NLDS. So I think it's the right move, and just the Phillies just have to close it out tonight.
Completely agree, Dave. Thanks so much for calling in, Dave. We're going to keep going on the other side. Dave, we'll get into that Nola matchup a little bit because you bring up a great point about how he's performed against the Braves. So thanks for calling in, man. Just as a reminder, folks, if you want to hop in just like Dave did, you're listening to the Call Sports New York, ad-free, interruption-free, break-free New York sports talk. We're doing a little national baseball talk right now, Wild Card Weekend. If you want to join the conversation just like Dave did, give us a call, give us a text at 917-793-1717. Check us out on Twitter at the Call Sports, at Kyle Fisher 45. We can talk whatever direction you want to talk, New York sports or nationally, as we know there's a few big things going on. Quick check-in before I continue the conversation that Dave started us off on. The Tampa Bay Cleveland